Okay, welcome everyone to another virtual science camp, this one on testing masks. It's good to have all of you joining me again. You'll notice I've opened a welcome poll just to ask you guys a couple of questions about yourselves. So please take a moment to fill that out as we're getting started here, and we'll go over the results of that just to start. Okay, and that's great to see some of you have already filled it out. We'll leave it another minute or two as I'm welcoming you guys here. So this session is going to be on testing face masks. Like I warned in the description when you guys were signing up for it, this won't be an official scientific recommendation on when to use them or when not to use them, but a couple of simple tests we can do with things around the house to look at how they work. So we're getting a couple of results for the poll. I'll just give it another maybe 30 seconds or more as there's a couple of people still joining from the waiting room before we get started on that. Okay, and I'd say that's probably enough time for the poll, so I'm going to share the results with you guys. It's interesting to see what you guys have answered, so I'm going to share it with you as well. Just look for the button for share poll. Let me know if it's showing up for you guys or not. I'm still getting Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. I think I had some connectivity problems. Can everyone hear me again now?
Yes. Before we couldn't hear you.
But before you couldn't hear me? Okay, I think it might have been because I had problems. I was connecting with a phone so that I can show you some pictures microscopically of masks. And there might be the phone fighting with the computer that's not being too happy with that. So if that doesn't work out, I'm just going to forget the microscope picture. Yep.
Will we be using masks?
Yes, go ahead.
Will we be using masks?
Can we put this in the microwave display?
Yes, the idea is that we'll be using masks and testing a couple of things about different kinds of face masks. So I recommended everyone try and bring 3 different kinds of masks. So you'll see like here I have a whole bunch of different ones. You don't need as many as I do because I wanted tons to be able to show you tons of different ones. But as long as you have like bare minimum 1, but ideally 3 different ones that you could test the difference between different ones. Does that make sense? Okay, and I'm just going to turn off my my phone, and I'm going to forget about microscope pictures because that seems to be messing up my whole connection there. Hopefully, it'll stop slowing down, and you guys will be able to see me and hear me better now that I've gotten rid of that extra device eating up my bandwidth. Okay, so to get started on things, we want to ask ourselves, how do masks work in the first place? So can I get people to suggest some things that masks might be doing to keep us safe? Either turn on your microphone and shout it out, or write it in the chat if you don't feel like speaking. So like what does a mask do? When I put this on my face like this, what's the difference between this and interacting directly with you? How is it protecting us?
I have to do the different
To prevent droplets that come out of my mouth. Excellent. Thank you, Deanne Rose. And that's one of the things it does to protect. Like that's one of the more obvious ones. And if you think about it, if I were to either spit or sneeze or cough with big noticeable droplets, it's a first line of defense catching that there. But even if I'm not having big drops of water, so Alex is also saying small drops of water containing the virus, excellent. So because we're in a pandemic and we're specifically worried about one kind of virus, even though it works the same for any kind of virus that might be in our saliva or in our breath, we're looking at preventing droplets of water, not only getting away from us, but getting somewhere else. So if we think of big droplets, like big ones from coughs or sneezes or actually spitting, then those will be stopped by relatively big holes. But we can have even smaller drops that happen when we spit. And I want everyone to try, just take your hand, put it in front of your mouth, and start speaking. Ideally without your microphone on, so we don't have the noise of a whole bunch of people speaking at once. But you'll notice with some sounds you make, you'll feel a little bit more air, and you might even feel a little bit of moisture. And it's not that you're sloppy, drooling a lot while speaking. That's just a normal thing that happens of human speech. So try speaking a little bit if you haven't yet, and mention either turning on your microphone or in the chat which letters or letter combinations you think might be getting the most moisture coming out of your breath. So can anyone suggest any sounds that, okay, we were getting P, B, D, T. Excellent, thank you, Alex. B and P. And those sounds, there's a group of four sounds approximately. So B, P, D, T. T is kind of different. I'm forgetting the fourth plosive sound. But a plosive sound is one that, to make this sound, you need to force some air out of your lips. Like it goes from in to kind of out. P, B, D. And those, because of what our mouth is doing, actually has a little bit of spray that comes with it. Not much under most situations, but a little bit. T and K is kind of like ch, like ch. And those are with breath passing over the tip of the tongue. So that's another one that like could spray a little bit as well. But we see even just from talking, oh, we get a couple more letters. V, that's the fourth plosive I was thinking of. G as well. So there's a lot of different sounds that we can make, and we could try and adapt our speech to avoid using any of those sounds, but that would become wildly impractical. So the face mask is useful for that as well. And then we also can have even smaller drops when we're not even talking at all that can get through. So the first thing I want us to do when testing masks is to try and see how small a hole we'd need to prevent water droplets from our breath going through, or how small droplets it can prevent. So for that first part, I'd like everyone to get a piece of millimeter graph paper. That was one of the things I suggested at the end. If you don't have one, you can use a regular piece of paper, and you just need to use your ruler a little bit more, because I'll want you to mark off a zone on it like I've done on this one, but I'll talk you through how to do that in just a sec, using coins. So ideally a bunch of coins nearly the same size or the same size, but if not, just any handful of coins you can get. And what you're gonna do, my coins are lost under my pile of masks. Here we go.
Mr. Gregory, can you just show the paper again?
Oh yeah, sure. So here, and I'm about to show that what I've done to draw lines, I've taken my coins and I've just made it so that the spacing between the squares is going to be twice the width of my coins. So like I could fit 4 coins in here. And to like just line that up on the desk so I can show you doing it on a new piece of graph paper. And again, if you don't have graph paper, you can do this on regular paper. It just takes a little bit more ruler work. And I think I'd originally line this up with 10-cent pieces. So on my graph paper, that's 4 squares because a 10-cent piece is nearly 20 millimeters. And so 2 of them is going to be 40. And same thing in the other direction. And just so it covers about half of the piece of graph paper, because it's going to be a target that we're going to use to drop the coins at. And we're going to see if the coins were droplets of water, and if this graph paper were a mask. And we'll see that's an approximation that's good, not excellent. Then we'll see how effective our theoretical mask should be at blocking these droplets of water. So everyone should be doing roughly what I'm doing right now with a piece of graph paper. Or again, if you had just a piece of regular paper, then you might want to have the marks down the other side too, so you knew where to draw them to. And there's a couple of messages in the chat I'll get to in just a sec. So if you're still making your grid, just continue it along like this, so you'll have a whole bunch of squares that are spaced about twice the width of your coin. I'm not sure I fully understand the questions in the chat. Oh, the last one, my voice is bad, so that's probably that my internet connection is slow. I'm just going to try and move things around to make it slightly better, because if one person's having that problem, everyone is. So keep finishing your paper while I go try and address my internet speed. Okay, if it's not a general problem, I won't worry too much about that. Okay, so how many squares? I have 4 by 4. It could be 3 by 3. Like you just need it so you have a couple of squares. If you have it even bigger, that's better. But just a couple of squares, it's going to be the target that we're going to bombard with coins. And the coins will be representing droplets of water. And these squares will represent the spacing between fibers of a mask. Are there any questions I didn't ask? Oh, how much in euros? Like I'm using 10-cent coins, but if you have a different denomination of coin, doesn't really matter, just as long as you have some coins. I'm actually going to grab more coins. I lost the ones on my desk that were surrounded by masks. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop the coins at the graph paper. And as long as it lands on the graph paper, so that one landed on the graph paper, and I'm going to look if it hit one of the lines or if it missed one of the lines. If it hit one of the lines, then that's going to represent a water droplet hitting one of the fibers of the mask. And because fibers are really really good absorbers, then even if it hits like a tiny bit like that on the corner of it, it'll tend to absorb a drop of water like that. And you can test this out if you have a piece of string that's a single fiber, and you put it near a drop of water, the whole drop will stick to it. So if I drop this coin and it doesn't touch any of the fibers, so if it doesn't touch any of the lines, that would be a droplet that would get through that mesh of mask. Whereas if it touches any of the lines, then it would be absorbed by the fibers of the mask and not get through. So here I'm just going to drop a bunch of coins and see how they fall. And I want you to do the same, either dropping one coin time after time or dropping a whole bunch of coins. And we should be able to count and see how many on average should get through the mask and how many should stop. So in my case here, this one, well, it would have been to the side of the mask, but it would have stopped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the line, and 1 droplet would have gotten through. So here, with this one throw, it blocked 1 out of 8 droplets that were, blocked 7 out of 8 droplets and let 1 through for a hole size that was twice the size of our water droplet. Does that make sense how that worked? And can anyone who gave it a try add into the chat how many got through out of how many were blocked? Like here, I'm gonna write 1 out of 8 of mine. You'll see that in the chat. 1 out of 8 got through. And then I'm gonna try and do that again, throwing, say, 10 coins this time. So I did another with 2 out of 10. We have some 13, but 13 out of how many? Eli, 12 out of 15 got through or were stopped? Or in, like got in the mask, right? Okay, okay, good. 2 out of 19 got through, 2 out of 4. So we're seeing in most cases, and this isn't perfect, and this is just modeling the situation. It's far from a perfect test, but in most cases, a hole that's twice the size of the water droplet will block about 3/4 of what gets through. Like that'd be 2 out of 3 out of 10. And that works out with like the 2 out of 13 is a little bit less than that. And if we keep repeating it, I've been asked a question, how close is it to the real ratio? And we can actually work out the math behind that. I won't dwell on that too much because like the math behind this gets beyond what some of you might be able to handle in a fairly quick run through. But if I look back down at my paper and I ask myself the question, just horizontally, like side to side like this, ignoring the fibers going this way, the chance that this coin the fiber, if I look in function of the position here, from here, and we could say from the edge of it, like just missing this fiber all the way to halfway across, it would miss. And then any further, we've got the same distance over where it would hit that fiber. So if we only had fibers running this direction, like this one, this one, this one, and this one, we'd expect those fibers to block 1 out of 2 droplets. Now that we have the same thing going the other way, of the 1 out of 2 that could get through this way, 1 out of 2 would be blocked this way. So we should have 1 out of 4 that are blocked. That was a little quick, so I won't dwell on that too long, but just the surprising fact that we don't need the holes in our mask to be as small as the drops we want to drop to still be relatively good at dropping them, blocking them. Now, if we had several layers of fiber, so if we look at most masks, like I have a surgical mask that I cut up so I can show you the different layers of it. And I got it all tangled up, but it's got 3 different layers of cloth in here. It's kind of hard to rip apart because they stick together well, but that's one. These 2 are still stuck together. If you have any old ones that like you're going to throw out because it's a disposable one and you're throwing it out, I encourage you to open it up to look at it. But there's 3 different layers in here. So if each layer could be, would block 3 out of 4, then each time you add another layer, it adds to that effectiveness. So we get that only 25% would get through with 1, then we have 25% of 25%, or like a quarter of a quarter. So a 16th of the drops would get through. If we have a 3rd layer, a 16th of that again would get through. So only 1/64th, or like 1.6% of droplets could get through if we have a triple layer. So already that's one thing that masks do. They can block droplets that won't fit through holes in the mask. However, water droplets can be arbitrarily small, especially the ones that are caused just by moisture in our lungs or in our windpipe, picking up some drops of water. So things that are smaller than we get while speaking or coughing or sneezing, we can have even smaller droplets. So masks need to be effective at preventing those from getting to other people as well. So the next two experiments will look at how that works. And there's a couple of things in the chat. So oh, that's an excellent point that Alex has mentioned. I overlooked that one. So what I think he's talking about is surgical masks, which are sold as disposable ones. They can actually be effective if they're reused and like if they're washed and reused, and they can be used a number of times, even though they're not sold as reusable masks. That's what you're meaning there, right, Alex? So that's an excellent point that I often forget about because I have a lot of like cotton reusable ones that I'll use most days anyways. But yeah, these surgical masks, which are usually thought of as disposable, can be quite effective when reused a number of times, especially if their main purpose, which is kind of the purpose we're looking at with our test today, is to prevent droplets getting from you to someone else. So yeah, no, it's an excellent point. There's no need to be throwing them out often or cutting them up unless you've used them a number of times. Yeah, okay, so the next thing I was getting at is the small water droplets that do get through. So these will filter out, and depending on how big the pore size, and like I was gonna show you with a microscope, that the holes in the fibers are actually like really tiny. On the micron level, even if you're just looking at a homemade cotton one, like I have this homemade cotton one that a neighbor of my mother back in Canada made with some like nice Canadian maple leaf fibers. If you try and look for the holes of these on low power in a microscope, you won't actually see holes between fibers. You'll just be able to establish that any gaps between them are too small to be able to see if you're only able to resolve to about 1 micron. So we're looking at drops that are smaller than 1 micron that get through masks, and they'll be able to get through most masks. And we'll demonstrate that with the last experiment. But the question is, what happens to them when they do get through? So for this part, I want everyone to take a regular piece of paper. Here's one with writing on it. I don't need that writing, so I'm going to use this as my scrap piece of paper. And what I want you to do is to fold it in half and rip it, and then repeat that several times. So you have a whole bunch of pieces of paper that are smaller and smaller. So here, 1 A4 sheet of paper, and I'm ripping it in half. Doesn't need to be perfect. Mine's a bit of a mess, but that's okay. So I have approximately an A5 sheet of paper, like half of an A4. I'm gonna fold that in half again, rip it again. So an A6 sheet of paper, fold that in half again, rip it again. And I'm gonna keep doing that until I can't do it anymore and it becomes impractical to try and do that. So what I'll have is a whole bunch of pieces of paper that are each half as big as the previous one.
Mr. Gregory, we have 2 papers. Wait, here. So do we do it with the 2 pieces of paper because we cut it in half? So.
Oh, that's an excellent question. So the other piece of paper shouldn't be ripped in half at all, and it should be a whole piece of paper, which is twice the size of the first half. Does that make sense? If it's confusing still, just set the unripped piece of paper aside for now. Where it gets interesting is the smaller and smaller ones. So you want to be able to get like the smallest possible. My hands are probably bigger than most of yours, so I might not be able to get it as small as you, although I probably have a lot more practice ripping paper in half. It comes up surprisingly often when you want to demonstrate things like this. And when it gets really tiny, I'm just going to give up on like folding it, and I'm just going to rip it so I get smaller and smaller pieces. Because the idea is you want the smallest pieces of paper imaginable. Then once you're done with that, and if it takes you a minute more, that's okay. There's no rush yet at this point. But I'm going to start making little balls of paper out of each part I have. So just like squish it into a little ball.
All the pieces of paper we have cut, we make them little balls.
Exactly, but not into the same ball. Like, don't squish it all into a pile.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but and this way, you'll have a whole bunch of balls of paper that should roughly have twice the mass of each successive one. Like the smallest one will have been with half as much paper as the second smallest, and that'll be with half as much paper as the third smallest. So you'll have a large variety of sizes of balls of paper. And it actually takes longer than I thought to make a whole bunch of little balls of paper. When I was practicing this myself, I'd done it with like a big ball and a little ball, and I didn't try and do all the different sizes in between. So if it takes you a real long time, don't worry about getting all the sizes, as long as you have some big balls of paper and some small balls of paper.
When we did the half one, do we do a big paper, the whole paper, or not?
I'd say yes, but if you don't want to waste that as a paper, like if it's new paper rather than scrap, don't bother. Because the main thing is to have a difference between big and small ones. So as long as you have some that are a lot bigger than other ones, then that's good enough to show what I'm trying to show. Yeah. That looks pretty small. Okay, just to show you now, like lined up on my graph paper, I have a variety of different sizes. And if you don't have as many, that's okay. If you have even more, that's even better. But as long as you have some, that's good enough. If you're ready with your balls of paper, then hold them up in your hand so I can see, or if you don't have your camera on, give a thumbs up reaction so I know that you have your balls of paper ready. Okay, it looks like some people are ready, but not quite everyone. So I'm going to give you another 30 seconds or more to prepare your balls of paper. If you need more than that, then after the 30 seconds, just like grab what balls of paper you have.
We've made a neat line. The first one, the biggest one, which is here, is half an A4, so A5.
That's beautiful. That looks like the best like progression of scale of size of paper that I've seen. Like it's much better than mine was. Okay, and let's say that's enough time, because like the point of this isn't to see how many different balls of paper we can make, but just to use them for something. So the first thing I want you to do is just like from the distance from you to your desk or your table, whatever you're working on, just hold them all in your hand and drop them and see if they fall at the same speed. And if it's a small difference, you might not notice a big change in speed, but a lot of you might notice the smallest one flutters down a little bit slower than the others. But remember, looking at how masks work, we're not looking just at how long it takes for water droplets to fall down to the ground. We're looking at how far they can get from a mouth where they're projected. So the next thing I want you to do, and I don't really have this set up well to show you where mine fall, because I've got like a mess there and I don't want to show you off to the side, but I'm just going to take my handful of balls of different sizes and throw them gently and see how far they go. And even though there's a bunch of like messy stuff in the corner, I'll still kind of show you guys. These smallest ones didn't go quite as far as the big ones that went like all the way over. And that's something that we'll find with no matter what material. If we have smaller and smaller pieces of it, then the mass of it is getting smaller as the radius cubed, that if it's a uniform shape, whereas the surface area is getting smaller as the radius squared. So the ratio of mass to surface area, which is just kind of a complicated way of saying how easily it'll be able to go far with its same speed, will go down. So we'll have small things, small round things like small water droplets or small balls of paper won't be able to travel as far for the same initial speed as big ones will. And On a couple of questions. Not sure. Alex, when you said 3 out of 11, that was like how far it went, or what was that about?
It's how many
Ah.
balls touched the paper when it fell. Because we dropped it. And I did the same thing as a coin, basically.
Okay. I don't think I was clear with what we were trying to do, because I started with the drop, but we weren't worried about how many went through. We could do that to model it as well, but it was just how fast they fell. And some of the smallest ones should have fallen slower than the biggest ones. And then the second thing was to throw them gently, and the small ones shouldn't go as far. And the analogy with water droplets is the smallest water drops we have, because through a mask, we'll be able to get ones that are like droplets that are on the micrometer or nanometer size getting through a mask, no matter how small the pore size is on a mask. So if it's a really small droplet, it won't fall quickly to the ground, but it won't be able to travel far with its own initial speed. If it travels, it'll travel because the air around it is moving. Oh, that's an excellent result that Rachel shared. So the big one went half a meter more than the small one. So that demonstrates that the big one can go smaller, further than smaller ones. Was I clear enough with that explanation? Like, so we can use the result for that, from that? Okay, it looks like some people are saying yes there. If it's still unclear, then let me know. And like with the other ones, I'll stay after the end of the session if people have questions that take a bit longer to go over. I'm happy to take a bit more time for anyone who wants to stay more than that. But how we'll use this? If but they can stay floating in the air for a while, then it becomes useful to know how far they'd go because of our breath. So that's where the candle comes in. Hopefully, everyone who's not able to use a candle on their own is with someone who's able to use a candle for you. Like, if some of you are young enough, your parents probably don't want you lighting fires on your own. So in that case, hopefully you're with a parent or someone who can light a candle. But we're going to use a candle to measure how far away our breath can reach. So if I breathe, I can feel that in front of my face, but I can feel it as far as my hand can go. So if I want to measure even further than that, and that's with no mask, like it'll be less once I'm wearing a mask. If I want to measure how far that is, I can use a candle, and I can see how far away I can blow out a candle. So here I'm at arm's length away, and I'm able to blow that out without much problem at arm's length. Now I'm going to put on a mask, and I'm going to put on a relatively thin mask. It's thin, but it's got planets on it, so I like it still. And when I try at arm's length, no matter how hard I blow, I can't blow that candle out. So if I bring it closer, eventually, I'll get to where I can move the flame, and eventually to where I can blow it out. So that's the candle test of where we can blow out, of how far our breath is traveling when we're breathing hard. Sorry, with a lot of breathing, I got a little bit lightheaded there and lost track of what I was thinking. Does this test make sense of how we could execute this test to compare different masks? And I see a lot of people with candles ready. So the next thing I'm going to add to this is a link so that we can share our results to this. So I'm going to add a link to the chat. And this will be a link to a Google form so that you can add your results. I'm going to preview the, not preview, I'm going to, I'll share my screen once I share this link with you. Okay, so now in the chat, everyone should have a link to this form. And I'm going to share my screen again so that you can see how you'd enter the results of this form. Just looking for the right button for screen share. Okay, so you see, you can choose what kind of mask you have, disposable, surgical. So like any kind that like kind of looks like this. Hopefully you can still see me in small. Or a homemade reusable, like this one from my mom's neighbor, or a store-bought one. This one came from Monoprix, and a friend of mine gave it to me for this session. Or this is like a Ministry of Education one. And then how far you could blow out the candle with the mask, how far you could, also how far you could blow out a candle without wearing a mask, because it won't be the same for everyone. So if it's more than 50 centimeters, that's how most you will be. Then wearing a mask, how far you could blow it out, and how far you could feel your breath, like just with the hand test while wearing that mask. And then submit your results so we can compare our results for that. And I'll have the results like going up in the background. I'll stop sharing my screen for a sec while waiting for results. Is there anyone who's unclear on how to get a set of results for this? If you've understood how to do it, then go through getting a test, start submitting results. If you haven't understood, I'll talk you through like me getting one set of results again. So I'll do it with this Éducation Nationale, like French Ministry of Education issued mask, the one that all teachers got in September. Well, all teachers who have a contract with them. So the first test, and again, if you're already doing your test, like ignore me, feel free to mute me. It's just if this is useful for anyone who didn't understand the first time. So first, without mask on, that was 50 centimeters or more. So I'm going to go to the form, and then the second one with the mask on. I guess I could have put the questions in a different order, because it's how far away can you feel your breath and how far away you can blow out the candle. And so I'm blowing. I can feel my breath this far away, grabbing my ruler. That's 8 centimeters, so that would be between 5 and 10. So the minimum, like on that sheet, because it goes from 5 to 10, would be 5. Then to blow out the candle, I shouldn't have moved it. Okay, and that was just under 5. So I'm going to share my screen. If anyone still was unclear on that, like that for results, that's how I got my results. So first, purchased reusable, actually issued by government, but 5 centimeters or less. Without a mask, 50 centimeters or more. I could blow out the candle from 5 centimeters or less. And here is between 5 and 10. So I'm going to go to 10 and submit that as my results. Looking okay, we already have 7 results. So it seems like most people have done this successfully. If you've gotten one set of results, then please change for another type of mask, so we have time for those who haven't yet put a set of results to get their set of results in. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we see in just a moment. I'm going to step to the side to prepare the very last thing I'm going to show you before the end, which will be an experiment to continue at home. So continue this experiment for another 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, and we have a good variety of different masks that have been tested. Looks like most people without wearing a mask, they needed to be about 25 centimeters away. And these two are very reassuring for the masks that you guys are using, because this one, to be able to blow out a candle, that means that your breath could be felt reasonably hard. And all except two people who responded, it was less than 5 centimeters away. So if you put that into what masks are actually doing, preventing water droplets getting from one person to another, if it's a water drop that's small enough that it couldn't travel on its own, which will be the case if it can get through the fibers of your mask, then it won't be able to travel more than 5 centimeters from your breath. And if it was able to travel 10 centimeters, that's only 2 of it, like 2 out of all the masks tested, 2 out of our 12 responses that was able to travel that far and no further than that. So that's extremely reassuring. How far people could feel their breath, the furthest anyone who could feel it was 15 centimeters, which, like, to look at that again with the ruler, that's about this far away. So that means there's no detectable, or like detectable with your hand, air current more than that far away. So theoretically, unless you were closer than that, close to the mouth of someone with a mask on, you probably shouldn't be getting a noticeable amount of water vapor coming through. Yeah, I really like those results. Thank you to everyone who submitted results for that. Okay, oh, and with so much fun experimenting, it looks like we're out of time. For those of you who aren't in a rush, I'll show you how to set up the last one, which I was saying before, that's something that you can set to test the last aspect of masks. So you might be able to hear in the background, I have a kettle that's boiling water. And this is because if we want to be able to visualize water vapor that's going through a mask, one way we can visualize a large quantity of it is to significantly increase how much water vapor is present. Boiling going through, so we can compare different masks by comparing how much steam we can get going through cups of boiling water. So I'm just going to step aside to grab the kettle and the cups that I've set aside. Okay, so you see I have 3 cups lined up here. And I have some very hot water, so I'm going to be careful not to spill it on myself. With no mask, you can see steam spilling upwards from the cups. And when steam evaporates from boiling water, by nature of how the process of evaporation works, it's one molecule at a time. So we won't have any drops that are bigger than a molecule. And when we can see the steam, it's because it's been condensing. And when it condenses, it's found a bit of dust or something else that serves as a nucleation site. I'm just holding these masks on tightly so that we can't get any escaping to the side. Okay, and then how we test the steam coming from these, that's a little bit like subjective, we could say. It's possible to use water detection paper, and I was gonna have you guys make homemade water detection paper, but it's a little bit more difficult than it's worth. But you could set that on there, or a low-tech solution, just a plastic paper divider. Set it on there and see which ones steam up first, and that'll give you an idea of which one is letting the most water vapor come through. Like I said, I'm going to leave that one as one I recommend you try on your own if you're interested in going further with this. because I've run over time already. So I think I'll wrap things up there. But again, like I said, if anyone wants to stick around to ask more questions, if there's any part that was unclear, I'm happy to stick around longer after that. But it is getting late. Some of you might be in a hurry to go. So I want to thank everyone for joining me. It's been great having you guys along. And we got some good results together. And again, like I wouldn't be able to get as many results if it was just me experimenting on my own. So you guys are really what makes this fun and interesting and worth doing. So thank you for joining me again. I hope to see a bunch of you at the One Neuroscience on Tuesday, where we'll be looking at measuring and density and making graphs to measure things, or at next week's one on chemical reactions in the kitchen. I forget what I called it exactly. I'll be sending out a schedule for later in the month as well, in about a week's time. So hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Thanks again for joining me. If you're not sticking around, then have a great evening and stay curious.
Bye. Thank you a lot.
Bye, Mr. Gregory.
Goodbye. It was great seeing you, Eli. So I'll assume no one has anything more to ask. No? Okay. But if anything comes up, feel free to contact me or ask me any of the next sessions. Deanne Rose, it looks, oh, beautiful. You have that set up and ready to measure the between them. And you can see with mine from that, like, because I see yours set up, then I'll show you mine. I don't know how well the fog shows up on camera. Like I can see it well, but this one I have actual like droplets of water through the homemade one. Through the Educación Nacional, it's got like a fairly big stain and a slightly smaller stain from the surgical mask. So it's not like a extremely precise measurement. Like there's no numbers to it, but it seems in the order I presented them, which isn't too surprising. The surgical mask blocked a little bit more. Oh, the surgical mask blocked a little bit more than the like professionally manufactured reusable cloth one. And the one that blocked the least, but like still blocked some, was the homemade one out of fabric that my mom's neighbor made.
They're good enough. Okay, turn it off now. Get out there.
And it looked like some steam built up there. If it's not building up quickly, one other thing you could do for it would be if you did it in a cold area, so there's a bigger temperature difference. Like I tried it when I was first like trying out different versions of this earlier today. I was putting it outside. I've got a balcony, but like a windowsill would work well as well to have a bigger temperature difference if you want to see it more. If you end up with any questions after you play around with it anymore, let me know and I'll be happy to try and work through them. So happy experimenting and have a good evening, everyone.